in this task, we want to import some global temperature data, and we want to import them into Excel and prepare for further data manipulation. In the end, we want to find out how they relate to CO2 emissions data. So the very first thing we ought to do is download the temperature data. The website you are given is this one. It's the website of the Goddard Institute for Space Studies, which is an arm of NASA. We want to download combined land and sea surface temperatures, and they are down here if you scroll further down, and we ask you to, I'll just increase this a bit, to download the Northern Hemisphere data. You can download them here as a TXT file or a CSV file. CSV stands for comma separated files, and it turns out this is an incredibly useful format, one that directly interacts with Excel. So we are indeed downloading this particular file. We're saving it. So we find a folder in which you want to put it, and let's call it the file, give it a meaningful name, temp data. If you do that, you want to make sure that somewhere where you can always find it, you have a very clear reference of where you got these data from and what these data are, i.e. the Northern Hemisphere data. It is very important when you work with data that you can retrace your steps. So what we now do is we are going to fire up Excel. So we try and find the file. And you will see it doesn't appear because it's not an Excel file, but you can change. You can tell Excel to look for all sorts of files, or in particularly, for instance, for CSV files amongst here, and it will see the CSV file. You double click, and as if by magic, the data appear as a spreadsheet. They continue to be a CSV file, but that is perhaps the first thing we're going to do is we will save this as an Excel file, as an Excel workbook. Okay. Second tip, we have now saved this as an Excel workbook. That means our original data file, which is still the CSV file, will still exist. And it's important that you keep a copy of your original data, because otherwise you may make some irreparable changes to your data. So let's look at how these data are structured. We're having years in rows. Okay, every year is represented by one row starting in 1880, and the last row is 2017, and months are represented in columns. Okay, here January to December. So it's pretty obvious what this looks like. This is the temperature data for January 9, 1880, February 1880. What exactly these numbers mean is not so straightforward to immediately see. It's unlikely these are actual temperatures, or we know they are not temperatures. We'll have to investigate that. But this is the structure of the file. We also have some additional columns here, and that will be investigated later. We will want to understand what these are. Lastly, you want to understand what these cells mean. There are some cells with 3 asterisks in there, and they're basically missing data. It's perhaps most obvious if we look at the last row, the number of missing data. The last data point here is for September 2017.